Hi, this is Anthony Douglas for Module 3 doing the special education interviews. I had the opportunity to interview three different individuals: Sally Limber, who is the special ed coordinator at Putnam City North High School in Oklahoma City; Tom Perkins, who's the assistant principal at Wichita North High School in Wichita, Kansas; and Maria Gonzalez, a special ed paraprofessional at Wichita North High School in Wichita, Kansas. In looking at the different ways that the child procedures and the way they child find students for special education, I noticed the special ed director as well as the vice principal, both pretty much said the same thing. And the fact that there's a teacher recommendation and or there's a way to get students into testing through observations, whereas the paraprofessional really lacked the information on how that policy worked or how that procedure worked in finding that there's challenges to every role, in particular their role to special education, they really defined it in several different ways, whether it be teachers' understanding of what special ed is, a parent's understanding of how special education works, meeting or following the IEP. But more importantly, I thought it was interesting that Maria Gonzalez, who's hands-on with the students, said it was difficult for her to keep up with the number of services and students that she serves. There was a big reward, always a reward in teaching, but always a big reward in special education. Sally and Maria and Mr. Perkins pretty much said the same thing. Graduation day, watching them walk across the stage and knowing that you've made an impact and a positive impact on that. You've met with parents in a positive way. You've had a role with these students and you've been able to have an impact to make sure that there's success for that student, not just in the classroom, but in life as a whole. They all had advice, a lot of advice, but they all had advice to make sure you know the student, you know the IEP, and more importantly, you do the right thing for the student and you do the right thing to make sure they're successful. I thought it was interesting. Ms. Gonzalez really emphasized the fact that you need to have patience with all parties because there's a frustration there between parents, student parent, student teacher, teacher student, and so on. But make sure that everything you're doing is what's best for kids and you know that it's the right thing to do. So, how can we work effectively with parents? Communication, communication, communication. Checking in regularly, making sure parents know what's going on, making sure there's no concerns or needs by those parents, but also making sure you have the right people, like Mr. Perkins said, the right people in the right position, and trust that they're going to do their job to communicate with parents and to respond to those parents effectively and efficiently. So, how do you work with regular ed teachers with special students with special needs? I think a lot of it comes down to that communication and support and help, and making sure you find ways to instruct those students to make sure they're successful in learning the information and gathering the information not only from the IEP or the 504, but from the parents and other teachers what concerns them, how they learn best, and then being a support system to make sure that teacher understands it's there to make sure that student is successful. They all had advice for first year administrators or going into administration, whether it was support the student, support the parent, and make sure there's support for the teacher. But I thought it was interesting. Most of them said to make sure that you know the student, know who they are, know their story, know what's going on in their lives, not just personally, educationally, and emotionally, especially if there's student with special needs in the ED program. So, how do they describe the role of the special ed teacher and the building principal? A lot of them talked about support, making sure there's IEPs are being followed, goals are being followed. Uh, they go out of their way to make sure that they get the same education that other students get. But I thought the big key that all of them talked about was finding ways to support and create a support system, not only for the teachers, but the IEP teacher and the student to make sure there's a way for that student to make sure they're successful getting the curriculum and getting what they need out of the class. So, what do you need to seek in regards to an administrator in special education? They care for kids. These students in special ed aren't like every other kid. They're very unique and they're very special. But caring for kids and making sure those kids get cared for in a unique way, making sure that they're treated fairly, make sure that they're given the information making sure that they are able to follow policies and procedures set forth by the state, the district, and federal law, but making sure that they do what's right and what's best for kids while treating everybody, not just the teachers, the parents, the students, the parents, but the whole team involved equally and fair. So, as part of the reflection of this process, I learned several things, really four big ones. Depending on the position, depend on how much information you knew about the process, and depend on how much information you could share or would be willing to share. Perception for each of the three was their reality. That's what they knew. Communication between not just the three of them, but the parties involved, the IEP team, that's what helped make the students' focus a success. That's what helped make the students' success the focus. It kind of works both ways when it comes to communication and working as a team. The evaluation of it, I think there needs to be better communication, including myself, including our paraprofessional and IEP teams, making sure that student success and student achievement and how to reach that achievement is the center of what we're all doing in education. Make sure it's the center of our classroom, and especially the center of kids with special need. And I thought one thing was interesting that everyone involved is paramount to the success, including the student in this situation, and including the paraprofessional. All these parties pay the same piece of the pie to make sure we're all successful in making sure that student is achieving what they're able to. So what's my projection? My projection is that laws will change, laws will evolve, laws will morph as time goes by. Policies will change, schools will change, more attorneys will get involved. Students with disabilities will be on the rise. There'll be an increase in number, not just because of maybe drugs or alcohol use or abuse, but because we're getting smarter in the way we study the brain, the way we're able to study ways people learn, the ways we're able to understand why people learn, but also more importantly, the education is going to have to adapt quicker and more rapidly than we are now to make sure students with special needs are successful, but also to make sure the support systems for teachers who are teaching these students are successful as well.